There are moments in life when money means everything, a broken bar, and then there are moments when your soul whispers enough. He's a broken bar is the story of a man who owned one of Africa's richest gold mines, a man who could have been a billionaire many times over. Broken bar, but instead, he walked away from $500 million to save something more valuable than gold, his soul. The world called him crazy. His investors called him a traitor. But the people of Burkina Faso, a broken bar, called him a hero. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 2, The Rise of the CEO. Background, montage of skyscrapers, boardrooms, and gold mines. Our story begins in London, with a man named Alexander Warren, a visionary entrepreneur, educated at Harvard, polished, confident, and the kind of man who could sell a dream to anyone. In 2010, Alexander founded Global Core Mining, a company that promised to revolutionize the gold industry across Africa. His idea was simple: use Western efficiency to unlock African potential, and investors loved it. By 2015, his company had raised over $2 billion in funding. They own mines in Ghana, Mali, and finally Burkina Faso, a small West African country with one of the world's richest untapped gold reserves. The Burkina Faso Gold Project was his masterpiece. It was supposed to produce 40 tons of gold in 5 years, worth billions. But what Alexander didn't know, a broken bar, was that this mine would also change his life forever. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 3, The Promise of Gold. Background, sounds of heavy machinery, golden dust, and workers mining. When Alexander first landed in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, he was amazed. The people were poor yet kind, humble, and proud. Children waved at his convoy. Old men greeted him with blessings. He saw in their eyes something he had lost: a contentment. For them, gold wasn't a path to power. It was just a part of their land, now their home. But Global Core saw something else: profit. The company's executives pushed for faster production. They wanted to dig deeper, mine harder, and pay workers less. They pressured Alexander to cut costs, even if it meant polluting rivers, or displacing entire villages. At first, Alexander justified it. This is business, he told himself. This is how the world works. But something inside him, a broken bar, began to change. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 4, The Turning Point. Background, thunderstorm, heavy rain, dark visuals of a mine site. One night, in 2018, a terrible accident occurred. A tunnel collapsed inside the mine. 12 workers were trapped underground. Alexander flew in immediately. For hours, he stood in the rain as rescue teams dug through mud and rock. By dawn, all 12 men were found lifeless. Among them was a boy named Abdoulaye, only 17. He had joined the mine to pay for his mother's medicine. He died holding a rusted shovel, still trying to dig his way out. When Alexander met the boy's mother, she didn't cry. She just looked at him and said, "Greater than you have gold, a broken bar, but you have no heart." Those words hit him harder than any loss. He couldn't sleep for days. For the first time, the man who conquered the world of gold felt bankrupt inside. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 5, The Inner Conflict. Background, soft piano music, close-up visuals of Alexander alone in his office. Back in London, his board didn't care about the deaths. To them, it was a minor incident. They demanded to resume operations immediately. Alexander hesitated. He proposed new safety measures, fair wages, and community rebuilding. The board laughed. "Alexander, we're not running a charity," one director sneered. "We're running a gold empire." But Alexander was no longer the same man. He had seen too much. He had felt the pain of those who lost everything for his success. He began donating secretly to the victims' families. He started funding schools and clinics in the mining villages without telling his board. But soon, his quiet rebellion was discovered. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 6, The Battle for His Soul. Background, intense corporate music. Tension builds. Global Core's investors turned against him. They accused him of misusing funds, delaying operations, and hurting profits. At a board meeting in 2019, they gave him an ultimatum: greater than either step down quietly, a broken bar, or we'll destroy you. Alexander refused. He said, "Greater than if saving lives destroys my business, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. That day, they voted him out as CEO. Within 2 weeks, he lost his position, his fortune, and his reputation. He walked out of the company he had built from scratch with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Scene 7, The Collapse. Background. News montages, chaos, reporters' voices overlapping. Headlines exploded. Greater than CEO resigns amid scandal. Global core faces legal turmoil. Burkina Faso gold project suspended. Stock prices crashed overnight. The company lost $500 million in a single quarter. Investors fled. And in the chaos, something extraordinary happened. Other people of Burkina Faso took over the mine. Local workers formed a cooperative with the help of the new government. They renamed it Mine du Peuple, Other People's Mine. Instead of foreign corporations, the profits began flowing to schools, hospitals, and clean water systems. The same soil that once brought death or broken bar now began to bring life. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Scene 8, Redemption. Background. Calm music, golden sunrise over African fields. A year later, journalists found Alexander living quietly in a small village in southern France. He had sold his mansion, his cars, everything. He spent his days gardening, reading, and teaching local children business ethics. When asked if he regretted losing $500 million, he smiled and said, "Greater than you can rebuild wealth, but once you lose your soul, a broken bar, you may never find it again." He added, "Greater than I didn't lose $500 million, I paid $500 million to buy my peace." Those words went viral. He became a symbol of integrity in a world obsessed with profit. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Scene 9, The Legacy. Background. Hopeful music, images of African workers smiling, schools being built. Today, the Mine du Peuple in Burkina Faso employs over 4,000 local workers. It funds scholarships for young students and medical aid for hundreds of families. A statue stands near the entrance of the mine, a simple bronze figure of a man holding a heart of gold. Underneath it are the words, "Greater than he gave back what was never his to keep." Alexander never returned to the corporate world, but his story spread across Africa and the West, inspiring a new generation of entrepreneurs to measure success not by profits, but by purpose. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Scene 10, The Moral. Background. Deep emotional orchestral music. Narrator. In a world where men kill for gold, one man chose to die to greed and live for truth. He proved that no matter how far you rise, your soul is still your greatest treasure. Burkina Faso may not be the richest country in the world, but today a broken bar, it stands as a symbol of what happens when conscience defeats corruption. And the man who lost $500 million, he may have walked away from gold or broken bar, but he walked toward God. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Ending Scene, Outro. Background. Gentle African sunset, birds chirping, calm wind. Narrator, soft voice. Sometimes, the true measure of success isn't how much you earn a broken bar, it's how much you're willing to give up for what's right. Because in the end, a broken bar, the richest man alive is the one who can sleep in peace. After leaving the world of business behind, Alexander moved to a small coastal town in southern France. No one there knew who he was. No cameras, no investors, no headlines, just a man trying to start over. He would wake up early, walk to the local bakery, and buy bread for the children on his street. He spent hours reading philosophy and spirituality books by Tolstoy, Mandela, and Rumi. One morning, a young man recognized him. "Are you the Alexander Warren, the one from the gold scandal?" Alexander smiled softly. "Greater than once, I was. But that man doesn't exist anymore." The boy asked, "Greater than, why did you give up everything? You could have fought back." Alexander looked out at the ocean and replied, "Greater than because I realized something. When you fight for gold, you lose people. But when you fight for people, broken bar, you find gold in them." The boy nodded, speechless. That moment became a turning point for him, and soon, for many others. Artist My Diaries Sedilla Scene 12, The Letter from Burkina Faso. Background. Soft African instrumental music, warm tone. One day, Alexander received the letter, handwritten, wrapped in a brown envelope. It was from Burkina Faso. Inside was a photograph, a group of smiling children standing in front of a new school. At the bottom, a note read, Greater than Dear Mr. Alexander, because of your decision, our village now has clean water, a school, and hope. We study every day beside the mine. Our teachers say gold is valuable, but education is priceless. Thank you for choosing people over profit. The children of Tenkatago. Alexander stared at the photo for a long time. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He whispered to himself, greater than maybe I didn't lose 500 million a broken bar, maybe I found something worth billions. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 13, The Return to Africa. Background. Uplifting orchestral music building slowly. In 2024, after 5 years of silence, Alexander returned to Burkina Faso. The government invited him to speak at a conference on ethical mining and development. When he arrived, thousands gathered, workers, students, officials, even families of the miners who once worked for Global Core. As he took the stage, he was trembling. He wasn't the CEO anymore, he was just a man with a story. He looked at the crowd and said, greater than years ago, I came here to take, but today, I return a broken bar to give. The audience went silent. He continued, greater than I once believed success meant building empires, but real success is when the people around you rise with you. Burkina Faso taught me that gold shines brightest a broken bar when it's shared. The crowd erupted into applause. Some wept. Some shouted his name. That night, for the first time in years, Alexander felt truly alive. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 14, The New Mission. Background. Hopeful music fades into calm piano melody. After the conference, Alexander decided to dedicate his remaining years to a new cause at the Golden Heart Foundation. Its mission, to support ethical mining, fair labor, and sustainable development in Africa. He partnered with local leaders and environmental activists. He didn't want to control the foundation, he wanted to empower others. When reporters asked why he chose the name Golden Heart, he smiled and said, greater than because a golden heart never loses its value, a broken bar no matter how much the market crashes. Over the next few years, the foundation built over 20 schools and helped train more than 3,000 African youth in engineering and management so they could one day run their own mines, their own companies, their own future. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 15, The Encounter with the Former Investor. Background. Light tension music, coffee shop ambience. One afternoon in Paris, Alexander was sitting quietly in a café copyright when an old face walked in. Richard Holm, his former business partner at Global Core. Richard was now a multi-billionaire. He sat down, looking slightly uncomfortable. Alexander, he said, you could have been richer than all of us. Why throw it all away? For a few miners? For mortals that no one cares about? Alexander sipped his coffee and said calmly, greater than because when I was chasing billions, I couldn't sleep at night. Now I have nothing, a broken bar, and I sleep like a child. Richard chuckled bitterly. You're still the same idealist. Alexander smiled. Greater than no, Richard, I'm just finally free. As Richard left, he paused at the doorway and for the first time in years, he didn't look powerful. He'll could a broken bar empty. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 16, The Final Chapter. Background. Slow fade of peaceful African choir music. In 2030, the news spread quietly that Alexander Warren had passed away in his sleep at the age of 63. He left behind no fortune, no empire, just a few notebooks filled with thoughts, poems, and lessons. One of his last journal entries read, greater than I once dug for gold beneath the earth, a broken bar, but the real treasure was buried within me, and I only found it when I stopped digging. At his funeral, attended by people from Africa, Europe, and beyond, a representative from Burkina Faso spoke, greater than Alexander Warren taught us that integrity can change the world. He may have lost his wealth, but he gave our nation its dignity. The children he helped educate carried his photograph in a parade, and on the walls of the mine du Peuple, his words are engraved in stone. Greater than the richest money, a broken bar is a clean conscience. At my diaries Sedilla Scene 17, The Epilogue. Background. Cinematic slow music builds toward the end. Narrator. In a time when greed rules nations and gold blinds hearts, one man's fall became humanity's rise. Alexander Warren's story reminds us that even in a world built on profit, A single act of conscience can spark a revolution of compassion. Burkina Faso's gold still shines, but now it glows with meaning, not exploitation. Because one CEO dared to say no to greed, no to corruption, no to losing his soul. And in doing so, Broken Bar, he became the man who lost everything yet gained everything that matters.